Have you ever wondered how something bigger than a building could be carved from a mountain and then simply abandoned? Or how entire underground cities with perfect angles and smooth halls could exist without a single record? Tonight on Unearthed Secrets, we'll explore real places, from hidden pyramids taller than Giza to ancient stones no one could ever move. These are not legends, they're mysteries, waiting beneath the dust of time. If you enjoy quiet journeys into history's strangest corners, like, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. We'd love to know who's out there listening in the quiet. The stone that waits in Yangshan. They say the stone was never meant to be found, not by us, not in this age of bright machines and glowing screens. It waits still, quiet, and untouched, as it has for centuries, maybe longer. You wouldn't notice it from far away. It hides in the low hills just outside Nanjing, in a place called Yangshan, a quiet quarry, mostly overgrown now, where the wind slides softly over the grass and the earth holds its breath. At first, it seems like any abandoned worksite, but then, as your eyes adjust to the scale, you realize this is no ordinary stone. It's not even a boulder or a slab. It's something else entirely. A single block of solid stone, but it's larger than a modern building, longer than a passenger jet. It lies embedded in the mountain like a giant waiting to stand. And its weight, no one really knows for sure, but some say it could be 16,000 tons. That number doesn't quite land until you compare it to things you know. It's more than 10 times the weight of the largest stones ever moved by humans. And here's the strange part. It was never finished. Someone, long ago, started cutting this monolith from the bedrock, not just cutting randomly, but with a plan. You can still see the marks. Clean, straight lines carved into the stone, too perfect to be accidents. The edges are crisp, not jagged, not cracked, smooth, almost unnervingly so. Modern engineers have visited the site. Quiet men with measuring tools and puzzled looks. They all say the same thing. We couldn't move this stone today, not without disassembling it, not with our cranes, not with our tech. So who, or what, was meant to lift it? That's a question no one can quite answer. Some say it was meant for a great stele, a stone monument that would rise to the heavens. Perhaps a tribute for an emperor, a forgotten dynasty, a god no longer named. But then, something stopped the work. A decision, a disaster, a change in plans. We don't know. What we do know is that the stone still lies where they left it, half cut, surrounded by the quiet scars of effort and failure. Down near the base, there are square sockets carved deep into the rock, not decorative, functional, as if made for beams or lifting tools or something else, something we don't quite understand. And then there are the knobs, strange stone bulges left untouched on the surface. They serve no obvious purpose, but you can find similar knobs on megaliths in Peru, in Egypt, even in parts of Turkey. Is it a signature, a tool grip, a forgotten language? No one knows for sure. There's something oddly human about it all. You can almost feel the moment. 1,000 years ago, or more, when a group of workers paused here, looking up at the sheer size of the thing they were trying to move. Maybe they were proud. Maybe they were exhausted. Maybe they just gave up. But they left the stone behind. It sits there still, not quite buried, not quite forgotten, waiting. Not for us. Not really. Just waiting. Steps beneath the fish pond, China's sunken caves. They didn't go looking for history. They were just trying to drain a pond. It was the summer of 1992 in a quiet village in Zhejiang province, tucked between green hills and slow winding rivers. For generations, families had raised fish in shallow ponds across the landscape. Calm waters passed down like farmland, like family names. No one had questioned them. They were just always there. That's how it begins. With something ordinary, a group of farmers, wanting to deepen a pond during a dry season, started pumping out the water. They thought maybe they could find a better way to raise fish, maybe even plant crops along the muddy basin. But as the water level dropped, something unexpected appeared, a flat stone edge, carved too neatly to be natural, and then, steps. Steps that descended into darkness. Imagine standing beside that pond, the midday sun flickering through trees, and realizing that what you had always thought was shallow and simple was in fact hiding something impossibly deep and impossibly old. The villagers didn't stop. They kept draining, digging, clearing, not out of scientific curiosity, but something simpler, wonder. They wanted to know what lay underneath, and what they found has puzzled archaeologists ever since. Beneath the pond was a massive man-made cave. The walls were smooth, the floor was level, the ceilings were high and even, not one, but 24 caves, hidden under the ground, spread silently beneath the village, a hidden world, carved with care, forgotten by time. Each cave was vast, some reaching 100 feet in height. The walls were lined with strange diagonal marks, as though someone had methodically shaved them down, stroke by stroke, at a perfect 60-degree angle. The cuts were uniform, no chisel chips, no breaks, just smooth, sloped stone, and every single surface looked intentional. What's more, none of the local histories, and in China local histories are plentiful and detailed, ever mention these caves. No myths, no royal decrees, not even a village rumor. They weren't tombs, they weren't storage rooms, and they certainly weren't natural. They were enormous, intricate chambers built underground, for some purpose no one can name. One cave, maybe you imagine it, begins with 3 steps carved right out of the stone, leading downward into cool darkness. Then a short landing, another 6 steps, even and quiet. Your feet echo, the temperature changes. Stone embraces you. The walls curve, not in rough arches, but in precise slopes, almost mathematical in their geometry. There are no cracks, no soot from torches, no signs of carving tools, just lines, smooth, slanted, careful lines, like the hand of something patient and ancient swept across the rock. But the deeper mystery isn't just the construction, it's the silence. Where did all the stone go? The amount of rock removed from just one of these caves is staggering. Millions of tons across the entire complex, enough to build a small city, and yet there's no rubble nearby, no pile of discarded stone, no trail of where the material was moved. Nothing. It's like the caves were hollowed out by vanishing. This single fact, the missing stone, has turned a strange discovery into an unsolved riddle. It doesn't fit with anything we know about ancient engineering. Not in this region, not in this time. And if you sit inside one of the caves, yes, you can still visit. It's hard not to feel the weight of that question. The air is thick, not with dust, but with pause. You hear your breath, you hear your footsteps, and nothing else. Some have said the caves were once used as underground palaces. Others believe they were military bunkers or ritual temples, but those theories collapse under the quiet logic of the place. There are no murals, no altars, no relics, no guards, no graves, no thrones, just geometry, just light and shadow, just the echo of human effort, but with no name behind it. Others suggest the caves were a kind of ancient acoustic chamber, places where sound behaved differently. Some visitors report that voices vanish into the walls. Others say they hear faint ringing, like a tone too low to notice until you've been there for a while. Could they have been designed for sound or silence? The floor plans of the caves aren't random. They're shaped deliberately, with halls that stretch in precise lines, ceilings that maintain their height for dozens of feet, and sudden open spaces, as if small chambers were meant to branch off into something more. There's symmetry, but not repetition. Each cave is different, but they're clearly connected, as though designed by the same mind. And then there are the carvings, not pictures, not writing, just lines. Thousands of uniform, diagonal lines on the walls, a signature without a name. They don't seem to represent anything, and yet they're everywhere, as if the builder wanted us to notice the technique, not the meaning. No tool we know today would carve this way. Not quickly, not with this scale, certainly not with such consistency. Some researchers believe these marks could be the result of a multi-person team, working with long tools, sweeping in unison, like dancers with chisels, moving as one, but others believe they point to something else, a forgotten method, a lost tool, a kind of ancient machine. That idea, of course, is controversial. But when you walk through the caves, past walls that seem to glow in dim light, past ceilings that never crack or crumble, past corners where the air turns still and dense, you can't help but wonder if something more than manpower carved this place. Could a civilization have existed, deep in the past, that knew how to shape stone with an elegance we've since forgotten? If so, where did they go? Why did they leave no trace? That's the haunting part. The caves are not ruins in the traditional sense. They're not broken, they're not collapsed, they are perfect, and perfectly abandoned. Some believe a natural disaster drove the people away, others suggest a war, or a plague, but still, why no record? No fragments. It's as though the builders stepped away in a single moment, as though the entire site was left, not in panic, but in peace. A quiet departure, a hand letting go. The villagers, even now, speak of the caves with a strange mixture of pride and unease. They know the story begins with them, but it doesn't belong to them. And maybe that's the truth of these places. Maybe they don't belong to any one people, or any one time. Maybe they were left behind for us, not to use, not to solve, but simply to feel. To remind us that the past is deeper than we imagine, that some steps don't lead forward or back, but inward, that beneath the quietest surfaces, there may still be echoes of something vast and waiting. The sun rises slowly over the village now. The pond has long since been transformed. A few children run along its edge, unaware that their laughter bounces off the ceiling of a forgotten world beneath their feet, and below, in cool, timeless air, the caves remain, not empty, just listening. The city carved from granite. Whispers of Gayu. They say that when you walk through Gayu, it feels like the wind knows where it's going. It slips between stone chambers as if remembering something. Something it can't quite explain, only carry, like an old tune, drifting through doorways no longer used. High in the hills northwest of Beijing, Gayu sits quietly among thickets of pine and ancient fields. It doesn't rise above the land like a castle or pyramid. It doesn't declare its presence. Instead, it sinks gently into the earth, hidden in plain sight. What you see when you arrive is stone. Endless, deliberate stone. Not tumbled rocks or eroded caves, but homes, rooms, stairs, paths, all carved directly into solid granite. More than 100 individual caves, 300 chambers, all nestled together like an abandoned city, lost in the folds of time. At first glance, Gayu feels simple, almost modest, but as you step into one of the doorways, cool air brushing your skin, and the thick granite walls narrow around you, it begins to unfold. There's depth here, not just in structure, but in silence, as if the walls remember something you've forgotten. No two caves are exactly alike. Some are long and narrow, others round and tall. Some open into courtyards with stone benches shaped like petals. Others spiral downward, forming private rooms hidden behind sharp turns. Some have beds carved from the floor itself, and in the center of it all, a temple small and solemn, with stone columns rising like frozen trees. It's quiet, but never empty. Historians have studied Gayu for years. Most say it was built between 1,000 and 2,000 years ago, perhaps during the Tang dynasty. That's the official theory. But there's something about this place that refuses to be pinned down by timelines, because even with all that knowledge, no one knows why it was built, or by whom, or how. The stone is incredibly hard, granite, unyielding, and stubborn. Even modern tools would struggle to carve the kind of clean lines and elegant corners you see throughout the site. And yet, these rooms were carved with a kind of gentleness, a care that feels more like sculpture than survival. And strangely, no tools have ever been found. No chisels, no hammers, no debris from carving, just the rooms themselves, complete, empty, as if the builders didn't need tools, or took them when they left. Some believe Gayu was once a shelter, a place of refuge during war or drought. Others believe it was a hidden temple for a long-forgotten spiritual sect. Some even say it was a prison, though if that were true, it would be the most peaceful prison ever built. But the strangest thing of all, there's almost no evidence anyone actually lived here. No ash from cooking fires, no scraps of pottery, no carvings of names, no remnants of meals, or toys, or tools, just stone, shaped, smoothed, and left behind. It's as though the people who made it were passing through, or perhaps never needed the same things we do. You begin to notice other things. Drainage channels carved into the floors, clever and unobtrusive, keeping water from pooling during the rainy season. Vents in the ceilings that seem to direct fresh air from above. Support pillars that hold the weight of rooms without cracking, even after centuries. Rooms built on multiple levels, with staircases that never crumble. This wasn't guesswork. This was mastery. It suggests a society not only skilled in stonework, but deeply organized. One that understood architecture, airflow, rainfall, and weight distribution, long before modern textbooks explained such things. And yet, we have no name for them, no face, no date, just the work. At sunset, the light bends through certain cave mouths at just the right angle, tracing golden paths across the granite floors. It feels deliberate, like someone placed the rooms just so, to catch the last warmth of the sun, even in winter. If you listen closely, the wind begins to sound like voices, not loud ones, not whispers, either, something in between, a presence, not a sound. Some archaeologists say the site may have housed a kind of ascetic community, people who lived in silence perhaps, removed from the world, devoted to stillness. And walking the curved halls of Gayu, you can almost believe it. The air feels thick with thought, a kind of quiet thinking you don't find in cities. But others, bolder voices, wonder if this was never a community at all, but a library, or a message, not a message written in symbols, but in space, in shape, in stone. Perhaps Gayu was carved not to be lived in, but to be understood, like a cathedral of absence, a sculpture made of nothing but questions. The stone temple at the heart of the complex seems to agree. It doesn't glorify a ruler or a god. It isn't decorated. It simply is chamber of symmetry. Two tall columns, a raised platform, a carved bed, as if someone long ago was expected to lie there and listen. Maybe to the wind, maybe to something else. One theory suggests the city was abandoned before it was even used, that it was meant for a migration that never happened, or that the people who carved it were called away before their plan was complete. But if that's true, why is it all so perfect? There's no sign of interruption, no half-finished corridors, no collapsed roofs. The caves aren't worn down by time, they've endured it, like they were built to wait, not just for decades, but for centuries, maybe for us. The name Gayu itself is modern. The original name has been lost, as has the name of the builders. The place has no claim on history, and yet it speaks more loudly than many ruins we celebrate. It stands not in defiance of time, but beside it. When visitors come, they tend to walk slowly, not just because of the narrow stone paths, but because there's something about the place that asks for quiet. It doesn't shout its mystery, it simply holds it, and you begin to feel, not like you're walking through an ancient site, but through someone's memory, a memory they carved in stone, hoping one day someone would listen. And when the wind passes between the caves, swirling through the old staircases, and between rooms too old to remember their names, You wonder, what if the memory is not of people at all? What if it's of stone itself? What if granite remembers the hands that shaped it? What if Gayu is not a message from the past, but a mirror, a reflection of something we once were, or almost became, before forgetting? And what would it mean to remember? Pyramids you were never meant to see. There are places you can find on a satellite map, but never visit. Places that appear from above, faint, triangular shadows rising from the plains of central China, and then vanish again beneath blankets of trees and silence. Pyramids, hundreds of them, hidden in the dusty soil of Shanxi province, clustered near the ancient capital of Xi'an, lie some of the most mysterious structures ever built, larger than city blocks, older than memory, massive, silent, and almost entirely unknown. Because unlike the pyramids of Egypt or Mexico, these structures are not tourist sites. They are sealed, covered, and for the most part, forbidden. There's no welcome sign, no ticket booth, no visitor center with air conditioning and brochures. In fact, the Chinese government has long discouraged public exploration of these sites. Most are on military land. Some have been quietly planted over with rows of fast-growing trees, forests that hide their shape from ground view, but not from the sky. If you zoom out far enough, you begin to see them, not one, not 10, but over 200. And among them, a giant. A pyramid so large that early American pilots in the 1940s claimed it dwarfed the Great Pyramid of Giza. Nearly 300 meters tall, they said, twice the size of Egypt's most famous monument. A structure now known, if unofficially, as the White Pyramid. For decades, people thought this was legend, a pilot's exaggeration, a mix of cloud and mountain, but then, satellite images began to appear, and what they showed matched the descriptions. A perfect slope, 4 sides, a deliberate structure, hidden, not destroyed, buried beneath trees in silence, and yet, no one is allowed to excavate it. Some say it's out of respect for tombs, others claim it's for preservation, but others whisper something else, that these pyramids hold not the dead, but a history too disruptive to tell. Let's take a step back. China is a land of meticulous record-keeping, dynastic histories, temple registries, village logs, thousands of years of written knowledge, preserved through wars, floods, and dynastic collapse. And yet, these pyramids, almost nothing is written about them. A few mentions here and there, some ancient poetry, a vague reference to the tombs of emperors, but for structures this vast, this mathematically precise, the silence is jarring. It would be like finding hundreds of skyscrapers, and no one ever mentioning they were built. So who made them? One theory attributes them to the emperors of the Western Han dynasty. Another places them earlier, in the era of the first Qin emperor, the same ruler buried with the terracotta army, not far from here. But the scale, the geometry, the astronomical alignments suggest something deeper, something older. Yes, alignments. Because these pyramids, just like the ones in Giza and Teotihuacan, seem to be arranged according to the stars. Many are oriented slightly off true north, mirroring the slow precession of Earth's axis, a movement that takes thousands of years to notice, let alone measure. Others align with Orion's belt, or certain solstices, or seasonal stars known to only the most dedicated astronomers. Which begs the question, who had this knowledge, and why would they embed it in stone? Some researchers believe these alignments show that the pyramid builders understood astronomy on a deep level, not just tracking the stars for farming or navigation, but for something more ceremonial or sacred. Others believe it was about memory, about placing something permanent in the landscape, something that would outlast war and time and empire. And that's exactly what happened. These pyramids have stood for millennia. They've watched as dynasties rose and fell, as villages turned into cities, as roadways curved around them like rivers parting for stone. They've been ignored, denied, covered, but never erased. They endure. You might be wondering, why hide them? Why not celebrate them the way Egypt does? That's one of the great mysteries. Some believe it's a political decision, that ancient tombs are considered sacred, untouchable. Others think the government fears looting, but some believe the answer runs deeper, that the scale of these pyramids, and their lack of historical explanation, threatens the accepted timeline of civilization, because if someone built a 300-meter pyramid before records existed, what else have we forgotten? Some fringe theories, though fascinating, suggest even more, that the Chinese pyramids, the Egyptian ones, and those in Mexico were all built by the same ancient civilization, a global culture, perhaps long before known history, that passed on techniques of stonework, astronomy and geometry across continents. It sounds wild, until you look at the shapes, the slopes, the orientations, and then, the similarities begin to whisper. But even without such theories, the mystery is profound enough. There is also the question of where the stone came from. Some researchers have proposed that the enormous quantities of material used to build these structures may have come from the vast underground cave systems nearby, like the Longyu or Hashan caves. If true, it would mean that not only were these massive pyramids engineered above ground, but that a network of unknown cities or quarries was built below ground to support them. Which leads us to the strangest question of all: why was this entire chapter of architecture, of ambition, seemingly abandoned? There are no more Chinese pyramids built after a certain point. The techniques vanish, the geometry disappears, the culture forgets how to build in this way, and no one talks about why. It's as if a curtain fell, and the stage was swept clean, and so the pyramids sit there, in fields, in forests, on hilltops, under trees, seen only from the air, a little too perfect to be natural, a little too forgotten to be explained. Maybe that's what makes them so haunting, not just their size, but their stillness. They weren't destroyed, they weren't buried in catastrophe, they were simply left behind, and maybe, just maybe, they were never meant for us at all. Maybe they were meant for the sky. Maybe the builders were speaking to the stars, not to future people, and maybe the stars, in their own slow language, are still listening. The mountain that was cut like paper. There's a sound mountains don't usually make. It isn't wind, it isn't birdsong, it isn't thunder, it's silence. The kind that settles when something impossible has already happened. The kind that lingers after stone has been cut in ways no one can explain. You feel it first when you stand before Mount Nokogiri, the Sawtooth Mountain of Chiba Prefecture, Japan. The name comes from the ridges, long, jagged lines that stretch across its flanks like the teeth of a giant saw. From a distance, it looks as if the entire mountain has been sliced, piece by piece, by some unthinkable machine. Walls of stone rise vertically, dozens of meters tall, too straight, too perfect, no crumbling, no cracks, just precision, on a scale that feels unreal, and that's before you walk inside. The cuts are everywhere, smooth vertical walls, sharp right angles, deep grooves that plunge into the earth like the mark of a blade. It doesn't look like the result of weather or time, it looks like intention. A quarry, yes, by name, but not like any quarry you've seen. Japan's records show that Mount Nokogiri was officially used as a quarry starting around the Edo period, some 400 years ago. And it's true, there are tool marks here and there, shallow scratches from chisels and hammers, but those marks, they only cover the surface. What lies beneath them, what forms the massive stone faces and corridors, is something older, something that couldn't have been made with hand tools. Not like this, because some of these walls stretch 100 feet high, their surfaces are smooth, their corners are true, and most strangely, the lines between them are too clean, as if the stone were folded, not broken, carved, not shattered. Imagine walking through a forest, and suddenly finding a stone wall so tall and straight, you'd swear it had been printed. The geometry is unsettling, not because it's messy, but because it's not too deliberate, too perfect. So what happened here? Some say it's simply the result of centuries of careful quarrying, that over time workers carved blocks with increasing skill, producing these sharp lines and towering forms. But when you ask engineers and stoneworkers, most raise their eyebrows. Granite doesn't behave this way. Granite is unforgiving. It breaks where it wants. It fractures under stress, and yet here it obeys. Blocks weighing hundreds of tons are stacked, aligned, extracted, as if the mountain were made of soft clay, not one of the hardest rocks on earth. And there are no broken fragments scattered about, no rubble piles, just negative space, the absence of stone where stone once was. Some of the deeper cuts run for meters in length, perfectly parallel, not a chip out of place. If you didn't know better, you'd think lasers had done the work, but these lines are old. They carry moss now, trees grow from their shadows, and no one truly knows how they were made. There's another layer of mystery here. When you walk along the deeper corridors of Mount Nokagiri, past the famous Buddha statue carved into one of its open faces, you begin to notice something else. Shapes within the stone, niches, pathways, blocks that look more like architecture than quarry. It begins to resemble a place built for purpose, not just resource extraction. Rooms, altars, entrances to something more. Some visitors describe it as feeling like the skeleton of a vanished city. Others say it feels like a ruin, but not from decay, from design, as if the creators left behind only the outlines of what they once meant to build. And then there's the question of repetition. These same sharp, deep cuts appear at other mysterious sites around the world. In the highlands of Peru, in the forgotten cities of Egypt, at Pumapunku, in Bolivia, where stone blocks were carved with such precision they interlock like puzzles. Always the same signature, always the same impossible geometry. Is it coincidence, or evidence of a shared knowledge, something older than history? Here in Japan, some believe Mount Nokagiri holds the key to that question, because it is not isolated. It lies near trade routes that have existed for centuries. It faces the Pacific, open to the winds of travel, migration, memory, and hidden within its scars is a language we've forgotten how to read. Not a language of words, but of stone. Perhaps it's no surprise then that Buddhist monks chose this mountain for their great Daibutsu, a towering stone Buddha carved directly into one of the quarry walls, a gesture of peace, of patience, but also of awe. It's as if they too sensed the mountain's ancient gravity and added their own voice to it. Today, as you walk the paths between those stone walls, narrow corridors that rise higher than the tallest houses, you feel small, but not unwelcome. The mountain does not loom. It waits, and in that waiting, there is a kind of invitation to wonder, to listen, to feel what can't be written in books or carved on tablets. Because sometimes the past doesn't shout, it simply endures. Stone doesn't speak, but it remembers. And when it is cut, not by machines, but by minds we can no longer name, it leaves behind something stranger than ruins. It leaves questions. Questions that don't need to be answered right away. Questions that carry you deeper into the quiet. Like footsteps in a canyon. Like whispers on stone. Halls with no history, the mystery of Luoyang's silent chambers. It began with fish, not with ruins, not with archaeologists or blueprints, just villagers trying to drain a pond. In 1992, a group of farmers in Zhejiang province, China, gathered with buckets and pumps to clean out a muddy pool. The pond had been used for generations to raise fish. Nothing strange, nothing grand. But that year, the water had gone unusually low, and when it finally cleared, they saw something they'd never expected. Steps, not stones scattered at random, not natural layers of bedrock. but a staircase, wide and precise, leading downward. They kept pumping, more steps appeared, then walls, then a ceiling, flat, smooth, undisturbed, and below that, an entire room, cut from solid rock. A man-made cavern, hidden under the fish pond, completely sealed from the world above. It was only the beginning. As the villagers drained more water, more chambers were revealed. Not one or two, but 24, each one massive, each carved directly into stone, each invisible from the surface, and none of them ever mentioned in any historical record. They became known as the Longyu Caves, though that's not their original name. No one knows what the builders called them. No one knows who the builders even were, because according to the history books, these chambers don't exist, but they do. Each hall is vast, up to 30 meters high in places. The walls slope at perfect 45-degree angles. The floors are level, the ceilings smooth, the surfaces covered in tight, diagonal chisel marks, all perfectly uniform, all made at exactly the same angle, as if the entire structure had been shaped, not carved, by hands that followed a design we've never seen. And the size, colossal. The total volume of material removed from these caves adds up to millions of tons, millions. Enough to build a city, enough to change the shape of the land, but there's no debris, no discarded rock, no quarry piles nearby. It's as if the stones simply vanished. Try to imagine it. 24 separate chambers, some with stone columns rising like frozen waterfalls, others with corridors that twist in darkness. Some are interconnected, others isolated. All are buried completely underground. All were filled with water for centuries, and yet perfectly preserved. And still, not a single ancient scroll poem tax record or oral tradition remembers them. No tools were found, no bodies, no furniture, no writing on the walls, just silence. Even in a country with 5,000 years of written history, the Longyu Caves remain a blank page. Some experts suggest they were quarries, but that doesn't fit. Quarries don't produce rooms with vaulted ceilings and decorative symmetry. Quarries leave behind rubble, scars, chaos. The Longyu chambers are architectural, even artistic. Others think they were tombs, but there are no sarcophagi, no grave goods, no altars, just clean, empty space. Some think they were storage bunkers, a kind of underground shelter. But why so many? Why so deep? Why so large? And above all, why no mention of them? Imagine building something like this, organizing labor, planning geometry, moving stone, carving symmetry, and then telling no one, not your children, not your scribes, not your gods, nothing. It's not just a mystery, it's a silence, a deliberate, durable silence. Some researchers have compared the Longyu Caves to other underground sites, like Derinkuyu in Turkey, or the carved cities of Cappadocia. But even those places come with legends, tales, hints of memory. Longyu offers none, and yet the craftsmanship is breathtaking. You can still see the chisel lines, close together, angled, continuous, like the strokes of a giant brush. Not the result of chaos, but of coordination. That means workers didn't just know how to carve, they worked together, they shared tools, they followed plans, and yet we have no record of those plans, no name for the architects, no known era for the construction. Even carbon dating is difficult, because the caves are carved from stone, not assembled from organic material, which leaves us with questions, too many for comfort. Who built the Longyu Caves? When? Why? Was this a sacred site? A ceremonial place? A shelter from something we've forgotten? Or was it part of something even bigger? A network of structures that once spanned the region, and then disappeared. There are whispers, of course, ideas, not conclusions, that the caves connect with older myths, that they echo ancient tales of gods or giants, that their patterns resemble sacred geometry, symbols meant not just to hold space, but to transmit meaning. Some have gone further. They point to the similarity in tool marks between Longyu and other strange sites, in Egypt, Peru, Turkey, They suggest that this kind of underground precision is not unique, but shared. A memory that stretched across cultures, a language of stone, but that language, if it ever existed, is gone now. All we have are the shapes, the quiet, and the fact that we were never supposed to find them, because for centuries no one did. The ponds above the caves were calm. Villagers fed fish, children played, birds landed on the surface. Beneath it, halls the size of cathedrals slept, waiting, and perhaps that's what they were built for. Not for burial, not for treasure, but for waiting. Somewhere inside these silent chambers, there may be a message, not in words, but in the walls themselves. A way of thinking, a kind of memory, a blueprint, not of cities but of silence, of what it means to leave something behind, without asking to be remembered. And when you step into one of these halls, now lit by faint modern lamps, you feel the air shift, cool, dry, thick with presence, not haunted, not threatening, just aware, as if the cave knows you're there, and has been expecting you. The pyramid taller than Giza and kept a secret. Some secrets are buried in sand, others are buried in silence, but a few are hidden in plain sight. Visible from the sky, undeniable, and still, somehow, officially ignored. This is the story of a pyramid, one larger than anything in Egypt, taller than the Great Pyramid of Giza, wider than any known step structure, and nearly invisible to the modern world. Not because it's small, but because it has been covered, not with stone, but with trees. Let's begin in Shanxi Province, China, a land of rolling hills and fertile plains, dotted with rice fields and winding rivers. It's a quiet region outside the tourist trail, but if you happen to glance at satellite images of the area, high-resolution ones, a strange pattern starts to emerge. Triangles, everywhere, faint shadows at first, then clearer as your eyes adjust. Shapes rising from the land, not natural hills, but structured, measured, aligned. There are over 200 of them, some sloped gently, others steep, but one towers above the rest, a pyramid, pure in form, four-sided, standing an estimated 300 meters high, nearly twice the height of the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt, and almost no one knows it exists. Western military pilots flying over the region during World War II were among the first to report it. One in particular, a U.S. Air Force officer named James Gaussman, claimed to have seen a dazzling white structure rising from the valley below, its sides perfectly symmetrical. Years later, another pilot, Colonel Maurice Shahan, echoed the sighting, describing a great white pyramid in the heart of China. When their accounts were published, few believed them. No such pyramid appeared in any tourist book, any museum or academic journal. But when satellite imagery became widely available in the late 20th century, there it was. Still white, still perfectly geometric, still officially unacknowledged. It has no tour buses parked nearby, no walkways, no placards, no guides. It's not even marked as a heritage site. In fact, if you try to visit, you may be turned away. The area is off limits, guarded, and in some places completely restricted by military installations. So the question becomes, why? Why hide the largest pyramid on Earth? One explanation is that it's simply an ancient burial mound, part of a necropolis from the early dynasties. China has a long tradition of earthen tombs shaped like pyramids, often built for emperors and nobles, but this structure is different, much bigger, far more precise, and its alignment tells another story, because just like the pyramids of Egypt, this one doesn't face due north. It's slightly off, tilted by a few degrees, exactly the amount caused by Earth's axial precession, a slow wobble in the planet's spin that takes over 25,000 years to complete a cycle. How could an ancient civilization, thousands of years before telescopes, measure that? And more importantly, why would they care? Unless this structure wasn't just a tomb, but a cosmic clock, a monument tied not to the earth, but to the stars. Many of the pyramids in central China, not just this one, appear to be aligned with Orion's belt, just like those at Giza in Egypt. The same triangular layout, the same celestial references. Coincidence or memory? Some researchers believe that these patterns, repeated across continents, suggest a shared source, a civilization predating the empires we know, a people who understood astronomy, architecture, and mathematics on a level we've only recently begun to rediscover. And if that's true, then these pyramids aren't just burial sites. They're messages, left not for the living, but for time itself. Let's return to the White Pyramid. We still don't know who built it. Its estimated weight, if made from solid earth and stone, would exceed 50 million tons. 50 million. For reference, the Great Pyramid of Giza weighs about 6 million tons. No crane today could lift such a structure, no blueprint exists, and no historical document, not even in China's extensive imperial archives, describes it. It is as if the builders completed their task, and then chose not to record it. Why? Was it sacred, forbidden to mention, or was it meant to be forgotten until the right eyes found it again? We don't know. What we do know is this: some of the cave systems near the pyramids, like the Longyu caves, contain enough excavated stone to account for the pyramid's volume. Some researchers suggest that the two are linked, the caves below and the pyramid above, that the stone was removed from one and shaped into the other, and still, silence. No chisel marks, no scaffolding, no trail of tools or discarded fragments, just perfect geometry, and trees growing where windows should be. You might wonder, what would it feel like to stand at the base of a structure like this? Strangely peaceful. The air is still, the trees rustle softly, the slope rises in silence, and though you're standing in front of what may be the greatest man-made monument on Earth, there's no crowd, no echo of history lessons, just the weight of something enormous and invisible. The feeling is difficult to describe. It's not fear, it's not awe, it's something closer to reverence, as if the builders, whoever they were, didn't want to be worshipped, they just wanted to be remembered. Not now, not even soon, but eventually, and maybe that's the secret. The pyramid is not hidden out of shame, it's not lost by accident. It was meant to be found only when we had the right questions. And maybe you're feeling those questions now, not the kind with easy answers, but the kind that rise slowly, like stars, and linger long after the story ends. Marks in stone that shouldn't be there. Sometimes it isn't the size of a monument that unsettles you, it's not the weight, or the height, or the age carved on a placard. Sometimes it's a mark, just a single line in the wrong place, a groove that doesn't fit, a curve too clean, a corner too perfect, something subtle but wrong. You lean closer, you squint, you run your fingers over it, and in that moment, a quiet thought arrives. Not loud, not dramatic, just, wait, how did this get here? That's where this story begins. Not with the Great Pyramids, not with giant statues or forgotten temples, but with marks. Strange ones, cut into stone with such precision they don't seem ancient at all. Let's begin in a village courtyard, somewhere in rural China, or maybe Peru, or northern Japan. The location changes, but the feeling doesn't. You're walking past an old ruin, a wall maybe, or the edge of a fallen block. Nothing grand, until your eye catches something odd, a perfect groove, not just straight, laser straight, not just smooth, mirror smooth, the kind of line you'd expect from a machine shop, not a Bronze Age chisel, but it's there, and it's old, too old. Your guide says the ruin is at least 3,000 years old, but your eyes say that cut couldn't have been made by hand, because stone doesn't behave this way. Not under crude tools, not in open air, and certainly not by accident. And then, you start seeing them everywhere. On blocks at Yangshan, on cave walls near Longyu, on steps in India, on staircases in Peru. Always the same kind of mark. Not chaotic, not weather-worn, but deliberate. Some are U-shaped scoops, as if dug out with a single sweeping motion. Others are square notches, evenly spaced, like drill points. And some follow impossible curves, lines that seem to have been etched, not hammered. One of the most famous examples lies at Pumapunku in Bolivia. Stone blocks cut so cleanly, they interlock like Lego bricks. H-shaped joints, drill holes in perfect alignment, 90-degree angles with no cracks, no chipping. If you look closely, you'll find thin slices of stone, layered like pastries, peeled back in uniform folds. Something modern saws can do with difficulty. And yet here they are, at 12,000 feet above sea level, in stone that's harder than granite. Carved. How? No tool marks, no metal shavings, just the finished product, unexplainable and forgotten. In Egypt, similar marks are found deep within quarries, and on unfinished obelisks, spiral grooves around shafts of stone, as if something had bored into them like a corkscrew. And in China, at Mount Nokogiri, entire cliffs show cuts so flat and vertical, you could mistake them for concrete. They're often so clean that visitors think they're modern, until they realize the moss has grown in sideways, and the surrounding stone has weathered over centuries. These aren't erosion marks. They're not weathering. They're not the result of time. They're choices, made by hands, or tools, that we can't quite explain. And that's the heart of the mystery. Because once you start seeing these marks, they don't go away. You notice them in the corners of temples, on the undersides of staircases, in ceilings you thought were solid, always in places where they don't belong. Even in tools we've found, ancient chisels, bronze picks, stone hammers, none are capable of reproducing the same grooves. Modern engineers have tried. They bring their drills, their diamond cutters. They attempt to recreate what was done thousands of years ago. They can come close, but only with great effort, only with electricity, only with tools made of alloys the ancients shouldn't have had. So what does that mean? Were these marks made by lost technologies, forgotten machines, or simply skills we don't understand anymore? Some scholars are cautious. They suggest the grooves could be made by years of polishing, patient labor, careful planning. But when the lines are identical across continents, across cultures that never met, that explanation starts to feel thin. Because human error is universal, and these marks don't contain error. They contain intent, the kind that whispers, "We knew what we were doing, but who is we? And what did they know?" That's where the stories begin to splinter. Some believe there was a civilization before civilization, a culture that understood not just stone, but energy, that knew how to soften it, cut it, shape it with sound or vibration. They point to resonant chambers, to odd acoustic effects in cave systems, to the consistent geometry of mysterious knobs on megaliths across Asia, Egypt, and South America. Others think these marks are leftovers, not from tools, but from something more fundamental, not drills or lasers, but some process of altering stone at the molecular level, an idea that seems absurd, until you see a block of diorite, one of the hardest rocks on Earth, carved with a curve so perfect it defies gravity. So we're left with questions without answers, but filled with clues. What do you call a line carved into stone, when no tool on Earth can recreate it? What do you do with a cut that shouldn't be there? You trace it with your finger, you lean in, and you wonder. Maybe that's enough, not to solve it, but to remember it. Because that's what these marks do. They don't ask you to understand. They ask you to pay attention, to notice what shouldn't be there, but is, to recognize that someone long ago left a signature in silence. Not a name, Not a language, just a line, a groove, a scoop, a notch, a cut, small things that somehow change everything. Where did the builders go? You walk through a corridor cut from stone. The walls are smooth, the floor is level, every angle precise, every surface too quiet for time, and yet there's no one here. No voices, no tools left behind, no carvings of gods or kings, just space, emptiness, design without a designer. And the question creeps in, soft and steady, where did they go? Where did the people go? The ones who cut this stone, who measured these angles, who carved straight into the mountain as if it were no more difficult than shaping clay. Because someone built these places, we know that much. They didn't appear by accident. They didn't grow like trees. They were made by minds, by hands. But then, those builders vanished. Not just in China, not just in Egypt or South America or Turkey, everywhere. It's a pattern that plays out across continents, across centuries, structures too vast, too precise, too strange for the people who supposedly made them, and then silence. At Longyu, the chambers are empty. At Pumapunku, the stones were left mid-assembly. At Yangshan, the megalith was carved and never moved. At Baalbek, giant blocks sit unused, like forgotten cargo, abandoned projects, frozen tools, no collapse, no decay, just stopping, as if one day they simply walked away. Why? Was it war? Disease? Did a ruler die before a project was finished? Maybe, but we find no signs of battles, no mass graves, no evidence of catastrophe, only the ghost of decision, of something that changed, quietly. Some researchers suggest a simpler explanation, that these places weren't meant to be finished, that they were ceremonial, aspirational. But look closer, and that theory starts to wobble, because unfinished projects still cost something. Labor, time, stone, food, planning. No civilization invests decades into cutting a 16,000-ton stone just to abandon it. No one hollows out 24 colossal underground caves for fish ponds, and no one builds with the kind of precision we see at these sites. Laser straight lines, interlocking stone, star-aligned geometry, unless the end result matters. So what happened? Some believe the builders were wiped out, not by war, but by time, by climate shifts, droughts, geological events. Others suggest migration, that the people simply left, moving to new lands, taking their skills with them. But then, where did they go? If the builders of China's ancient pyramids moved, where are the similar structures elsewhere? If the architects of the Longyu caves resettled, why didn't they keep building? Why leave such perfection behind, and never repeat it? That's the deeper mystery. Not just that the builders vanished, but that their knowledge did too. We remember wars, we remember kings, we remember borders, but we do not remember how to build like this, how to move stones without cranes, how to carve curves into granite without saws, how to align entire mountain complexes to the stars without telescopes. That knowledge, practical, physical knowledge, should survive. It should have been passed down, recorded, practiced, and yet it wasn't. It disappeared, almost as if someone wanted it forgotten, maybe not erased, but buried, beneath time, beneath simpler stories. Maybe it was too dangerous, maybe it belonged to a time that ended too suddenly, or maybe it was never ours to begin with. Some whisper theories, not of people, but of visitors, of knowledge handed down, not earned, of blueprints left behind by a different kind of intelligence. But let's stay grounded. Let's look only at the stone, because the stone doesn't lie. It tells us someone was here, someone with patience, skill, vision, someone who thought in centuries, not seasons. And yet, we find no names, no builder's marks, no made by inscriptions, just massive forms, and total anonymity. That's the strangest part. You would expect pride. Monuments are usually loud with ego. Pharaohs put their faces on walls. Emperors chiseled poems into columns. But here, nothing, not even a signature, as if the builders didn't want to be known. Or maybe they knew we wouldn't understand. So what do we do with that? What do we do with places built to last forever, when the people who built them are nowhere to be found? We walk through them, we trace their lines, we listen to their silence, and we ask questions, even if the answers never come, because mystery isn't failure, it's an invitation. And maybe the people who built these wonders didn't vanish. Maybe they became the silence, the quiet wonder that slows your breath as you enter a stone chamber with no sound but your own heartbeat. The builders are gone, but their questions remain. Maybe that was the plan all along. Stone that moved without wheels. Some things we've learned to accept without ever really understanding. A temple balanced on a cliff. A statue taller than a house, resting on its heels. A stone block, heavier than a military tank, placed neatly among a dozen others, edges tight enough to hold air still. And yet, we don't ask too many questions. We nod at tour guides. We read museum placards. We take pictures and walk away. But tonight, let's pause. Let's ask. Because behind every towering monument, behind every perfect joint of stone, is one question that echoes through time. How did it get there? More precisely, how did they move it? Not carve it, not shape it, but move it. Because that may be the greatest mystery of all. Let's start with a number, 16,000 tons. That's the estimated weight of the unfinished megalith at Yangshan Quarry, just outside Nanjing, China. It's a single piece of stone, longer than a tennis court, partially detached from the mountainside. It was clearly meant to be moved. Its edges are shaped, its underside is hollowed. The builders had already carved precise square notches, maybe for ropes, maybe beams, maybe levers, but at some point, they stopped. The stone still lies there, tilted, waiting, too massive for even modern cranes, too cleanly carved to be a mistake. And Yangshan is not alone. In Baalbek, Lebanon, we find the stone of the pregnant woman, 1,000 tons at least, and just a few meters away, another block, even heavier, each one quarried, shaped, and prepared to be moved, but never taken. And yet, some blocks did move. At Baalbek's main temple platform, stone blocks nearly as large have been stacked, not rolled, not dragged, but lifted and aligned. No mortar, no concrete, just weight, and impossible precision. So how? How do you move stone that has no wheels? Let's talk about wheels for a moment. They were invented long after some of these structures were built. The earliest true wheel and axle combination appeared around 3500 BCE, but many megalithic sites predate that. Others exist in regions where wheels weren't used at all. In ancient South America, for example, the wheel was never widely adopted, not for carts, not for transport. Yet the stonework there is astonishing. At Sacsayhuaman, in Peru, massive polygonal blocks, some weighing 200 tons or more, are fitted together so tightly that even a razor blade cannot pass between them. They sit high above sea level. No ramps, no roads, just perfectly balanced weight. How did they get there? Some scholars propose sledges and rope systems. Others suggest massive labor forces, tens of thousands of workers dragging stones over great distances. But the terrain doesn't help. In places like Machu Picchu or Pumapunku, there are no flat plains, no wide roadbeds, only mountain switchbacks and narrow valleys. Some blocks appear to have been moved uphill, not just across the land, but rising hundreds of meters from quarry to site. It's possible, some say, but just barely. And still, no solid evidence, no sketches, no tools, no detailed records of how, only the result. Which brings us to the theories. Some are cautious. They lean on friction, levers, wooden rollers. Others suggest alternative materials, that perhaps the stone was softened using unknown chemistry, made malleable for transport. There's a theory from South America, whispered more than written, that the Inca used plants to soften stone, a kind of natural solvent that allowed rock to bend and mold. We've never found the plant, we've never found the recipe, but the legend persists. Then there's the sound theory. Ancient texts in several cultures, from Egypt to Tibet, describe builders using vibration to lift heavy stone, not hammers, not wheels, but tones, chanted frequencies, metal bowls, horns, a harmony that somehow reduced the weight, or even reversed it. We have no proof of this, no videos, no surviving instruments, just stories, and yet, the stones moved. In Egypt they say Imhotep, the great architect, could speak the language of stone. In China, they whisper that the Yellow Emperor's court possessed moving mountains, devices that could float entire palaces through the air. In India, ancient texts describe the Vimana, not just flying ships, but machines that could cause stone to dance. It's easy to laugh at these ideas, but when we can't even explain the cuts, the weights, the placement, why not wonder? In modern times, we've tried to recreate these feats. We bring cranes, trucks, thousands of man-hours, and often, we still can't match it. Blocks shift, measurements fail, margins of error widen. The ancients didn't allow for error. They didn't just move the stones. They placed them, with purpose, with patience, and perhaps with something else, something we've lost. We might never know what it was, but the stones remember. They sit, unmoved, unmoving, and unmoved by time. Massive weights that defy logic, but not belief. Because belief is all we have left. We don't have their tools. We don't have their blueprints. We don't even have their names. Only the echo of their work, and the stones that moved. Without wheels, without writing, without a sound. We've walked through chambers cut from silence, stood beside stones that no one ever moved, and followed staircases that vanish into the earth. Some of these places were started but never finished. Some were hidden, perhaps on purpose, and all of them ask the same quiet question: who built them and why? Maybe we'll never know, or maybe the answers are still waiting, just beneath the dust and the roots and the time. Thank you for joining us tonight here on Unearthed Secrets. If this journey left you wondering too, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. We'll be back soon with more mysteries, more quiet footsteps into the past. Until then, rest well. And remember, some stones were never meant to be forgotten.